entrepreneur, a homeowner, a motorist, there's much you can do to rid the world of unnecessary walking. And I hope to inspire you to greater efforts than you may have made already in this direction. I see that this is the 12th International Pedestrian Conference. I would have thought by now that you'd have your act together. The resources for screwing the pedestrian are many and varied. And today I will show you how a few other activists have made great strides in putting pedestrians where they belong. This is what we're here about. I don't want to mince words. There are several principles involved in this, and I'll mention them as we go along because they're important to this objective. The first of these is to think small. Give pedestrians as little as you have to. If you have little pedestrians, give them a little space. Over a period of time, you can gradually reduce the space to nothing, which is what they deserve. A second principle is to do something permanent. If you can build a brick wall to squeeze pedestrians out into a busy street, as in this picture, you don't have to go back and do it again. And there are many ways to lock anti-pedestrian practices into building codes and street standards. Building codes that allow concrete steps to be built out into the sidewalk area make a permanent and legally sanctioned intrusion into pedestrian comfort and safety. One can always add a touch of traffic sign garnish to such locations to further interfere with pedestrian navigation. Here's a neat example of how architects and planners have added their little bit of hell to pedestrian life. As an engineer, I've often thought architects were sort of sob sisters. But this sort of sidewalk treatment shows that their hearts are in the right place. Here in Washington, we use granite blocks for this purpose, but I think this is the superior treatment. Hydraulic engineers have a contribution to make. Some of you may think this is a bicycle track, but it can do, but it's actually designed to snare small feet, high heels, and people on crutches. Again, once in place, this official drain is unlikely to be removed for some time. There are other steps that those in authority can take. In this photo, for example, the local traffic engineer was compelled to paint a pedestrian crosswalk. That did not stop him from putting a parking meter in such a position that parked cars completely blocked the crosswalk. An even better example of real initiative, municipal initiative, is shown here. And the principle involved is combinations. Try to combine measures to do more than one thing at a time. Once again, the local officials had to put in a crosswalk, but they ensured that it led to an unpaved corner occupied by a lot of poles. Now, try to find the pedestrian signal. It's there, but cleverly hidden behind one of those poles, as you can see in this slide. It's a fine combination. Even better is the fact, when you do find the signal, it's not working. These officials didn't panic when they found they had to install a pedestrian signal. First they hit it, and then they turned it off. This, by the way, is just one of the ways in which pedestrian signals can be used to frustrate walkers. With a little clever signal timing, it's possible to delay the walk signal until the pedestrians have turned to stone. You'll forgive my pride in my former profession, one of the world's oldest. Now, much can be done to clutter and squeeze walking areas. Clutter and squeeze are two more principles. This is a fairly standard example, a permanent wall with a decorative traffic sign. More can be done, however, with the cooperation of your local utility company. Power poles are bigger than signposts, and they leave splinters and creosote on those who brush against them. If a utility company won't put its poles directly in the sidewalk area, perhaps you can convince them at least to put some guy wires there. This example is one to be proud of. Two guy wires. When people get up from tripping over the first one, the second one gets them by the throat. Now there are environmentally sound ways to clutter pedestrian areas. Plant a tree, watch it grow. Arbor Day is April 22nd for those of you who are looking for an excuse. It's a wonderful way to get the tree huggers on your side. There's no way in these environmentally sensitive times that that tree is going to come out. Only God can make a tree, and who knows who makes pedestrians. If possible, combine tree planting with other decorative treatments and force pedestrians into narrower and narrower spaces. We all know what the area between the curb and the adjacent buildings is for. Anything but pedestrians. Now let's see how our contractor friends screw the pedestrian. Like the Soviets, we have much to learn from the private sector. In this photo, you can see that subway builders have created neat little vertical pedestrian storage areas for those few pedestrians who've managed to make it through the construction zone. The most direct construction approach, of course, is simply to rip up the pedestrian area and let pedestrians fend for themselves. In this particular case, the pedestrians have come prepared with boots, since this torn up sidewalk area was left that way for such a long period of time. Here's another case where the sidewalk was removed, easily navigable by day in dry weather, but a killer at night. It's also possible to work several stories up and still make pedestrian areas hard to get through. And here's a good example. The first time I saw this location, there was a woman crawling through the framework. And we can all understand why the contractor nailed up those boards to stop that sort of intrusion into what is normally a tool dropping area. Contractors can show a little initiative even when they are required to shield pedestrian areas. As in this example, where the contractor had to provide a little space for bus loading, but thoughtfully ignored the rear exit door, requiring pedestrians to navigate through sandbags, concrete blocks, and the like on the most glamorous shopping street in America. If you can't put something in the pedestrian's way permanently, at least work there. Run equipment back and forth and put barricades on the smooth part of the sidewalk. Cut down on walking space, the basic principle of infrastructure improvement. There are lots of ways to do this, as our contractor friends are anxious to demonstrate. The sidewalk is a wonderful place to put the outriggers from unstable equipment. In this case, the contractor also put a pile of sand on the other side of the sidewalk and spotted a few traffic cones around to keep pedestrians from scratching his equipment. Here's another example where a contractor used the sidewalk area, and this is the designated sidewalk area, to put a crane outrigger, making passage impossible for all but trim gymnasts. Again, combinations are important. Here, the back of the crane swings into a sidewalk area, a good first step. This builder went one step further, however, and stretched a hose across the sidewalk so that a pedestrian distracted by the obvious hazard of the swinging crane will fall victim to the hose. Most cities require that contractors leave some walking space for pedestrians adjacent to construction sites. So what? There's no better place to put a wheelbarrow to collect junk. This contractor put the pedestrian in the dirt where he belongs. In fact, this same contractor managed to completely block the pedestrian area with some equipment in the background across the sidewalk. Then he parked a mobile crane at the curb, forcing pedestrians out into an unprotected arterial street. A first-class job of taking the extra step. Sidewalks and crosswalks are also wonderful places to store equipment when it's not used. Carefully placed, as in this example, pedestrians are forced into a major street, again without protection, or required to duck under equipment that would ordinarily be in a hard hat area. Materials can also be stored on sidewalks. The hidden purpose here is not just to occupy space, but to place two hard-to-see 2x4s across the remaining sidewalk area, as shown in the background. A surefire ankle twister, especially at night, when pedestrians ought to be off the streets anyway. Store anything. Completely block the sidewalk area, if possible. And if you get away with it, use official-looking traffic signs to encourage pedestrians to walk with their backs to traffic. This is an official sign, as a matter of fact, and is reflectorized in case pedestrians are wearing headlights. Actually, this is a rather tidy storage area. A far better example is this one, where there's no pretense at aesthetics. Treat the pedestrian like garbage, with garbage. And of course, not only contractors can do this. Any resident or business person has an opportunity to show his or her contempt. This is in New York Soho area and is an example of abstract expressionism. It expresses disdain for the walkers. And here too, a contractor expresses his opinions of passers-by. And we must say, well said, for it leaves little to the imagination. What better place to put a chippy timber? Suppliers to the construction industry also have a part to play. Here, in what little sidewalk area remains after a contractor has stored his equipment and materials, a subcontractor is resting his refrigerators. There's not a cop in the world who's going to tell him to move his stuff. It's the natural place for refrigerators, or office dividers, or anything else. Now, as I said earlier, contractors are supposed to provide walking areas, covered in some cases. But that didn't prevent this one from taking over that area, first by putting those ever-present outriggers in the space, and then by roping it off with decorative bunting, putting people out in the street where they belong. The basic principle is block or narrow. This contractor is theoretically required to leave at least a 3-foot walking area. This contractor, bless him, chiseled on that, and then went the extra step, opened a manhole, put a barricade over it, and sent the pedestrian packing into the street. Our builder friends are not to be intimidated by simple-minded rules, and neither should we. Some builders have shown a certain subtlety, gradually narrowing the sidewalk area until pedestrians find themselves climbing Volkswagens. And if it works on one side of the street, it will work on the other. Given that this was only in place for a little over a year, who could complain? If a contractor is reluctant to go the whole hog, it's possible to take small steps and fill in an area with meaningless boards, signs, or trivia. Who knows what that sign means, or if it's a sign? What better place to put it? Smaller contractors have to make do with what they have. In this case, parking a workman's truck on the sidewalk, placing a dumpster next to the curb, and then putting a dump truck next to that. Let's face it, there is nowhere for the pedestrian to go but across the street. Or as contractors say to most pedestrians, around the corner and up your street. The contractors improvised nicely here and deserves a great deal of credit. Trucks can be parked, construction trucks can be parked anywhere, of course, such as in the pedestrian crosswalk area. In this case, once again, this contractor, actually a utility, has taken extra pains to loop some hose in the area that pedestrians are forced to use, making the likelihood of mayhem just a little bit greater. The walking surface can be interfered with in other ways, of course. Driving equipment back and forth over it will reduce it to rubble pretty quickly. A rough surface is guaranteed to displease and perhaps injure pedestrians. If one is forced to provide a relatively smooth surface, it's possible to sink it below the level of the surrounding sidewalk so as to snag careless walkers. Now, perhaps you think I give too much credit to contractors. As we know, everyone has a role to play. Municipalities can take active steps to take over pedestrian space. What better place for mailboxes, telephone booths, fire hydrants, trash receptacles, fire alarm boxes, and benches. We have grown so accustomed to this that no one notices that all these devices occupy space that selfish pedestrians rightly consider their turf. Here, for example, a large traffic signal control box has been placed in the scarce space at the end of a crosswalk. Good step. You can see that pedestrians are still able to squeeze through, so some maintenance worker deserves real credit for adding a completely meaningless barricade to further restrict the area. Again, everyone can play this game. What better place to drape rope from window washing equipment, for example, across the pedestrian area rather than just coiling it up out of the way. And here is where one can combine open doors from delivery vehicles and open covers from basement elevators to fill pedestrian space. The man on the right, by the way, is armed. Open delivery vehicle doors and illegal signs make easy and cheap barricades to unimpeded use of sidewalks. Whose city is it, anyway? And here is where the entrepreneurial spirit can be given free rein. Sidewalks are for commerce. What better place to sell Panama hats and t-shirts? Or chairs? Or anything. Grapefruit, dates, nuts. It's not just a big city game. And of course, the free press is entitled to go anywhere. Now, how this woman got through the vending machine, I don't know, but it's obvious that there's room for another box. Not only entrepreneurs have a role, householders have a responsibility to do their share. What better place than the sidewalk area for a little residential planning? A tree, a rock, a shrub. If one adds a wall on one side and parked cars on the other, the job of walking is really made onerous, and one can hardly imagine where a woman pushing a baby carriage would go in this residential area. And of course, in our mobile society, what better place to park something? It may not be permanent, but it's solid. Little companies and big ones can play this game. And we all know the UPS motto: if you don't like the way I drive, stay off the sidewalk. Government can play too, and is particularly able to park anywhere, preferably in crosswalks. This piece of work was a good first effort, but a little more practice will allow the driver to completely fill the crossing zone. And we all know the Postal Service motto: neither rain nor snow nor pedestrian rights will stay these couriers, etc., etc. Our friends overseas have much to teach us. This is an international meeting. These clever Japanese have perfected the art of infiltration. This encroachment into a pedestrian area started with just one bite, and another, and another, and you see the result. Mothers with baby carriages need not try to use this railroad station's shopping area. And always, imagination is important. What pedestrian would have expected to find this a drag race? Heaven knows the space is more than pedestrians need. Imagination and surprise. I don't know what beast lurks beneath the streets, but I don't think that woman is going to make it to lunch. Pedestrians are at the bottom of the food chain. And you mustn't feel that aggressive action is necessary to screw the pedestrian. Our final important principle is neglect. Doing good by doing nothing reduces energy consumption and keeps taxes low. Just because the city built a curb doesn't mean that it has to maintain it. What a neat surprise for the unwary walker. Sidewalks too can go to ruin. Or better yet, sidewalks and curbs. The parking meters are in good shape though, aren't they? This award-winning city has its priorities straight. Once again, personal neglect. Every homeowner's privilege can do a lot to trip up the pedestrian. The sign, of course, adds to the hazard. One more thing to trip over. As a matter of fact, this homeowner was warned about these perilous conditions and made some improvements. Put in a new sign. There are all kinds of subtle neglect. Dripping water can do a lot for a pedestrian area. Those who walk in its vicinity get to walk in mud and leave traces for future generations of archaeologists to puzzle. And if a little water is good for pedestrians, a lot of water is even better. Well, this has been a brief introduction to your afternoon program on the possibilities of screwing the pedestrian. The point of it all is obvious. There are countless ways for each of us to show where we'd really like pedestrians to go. And it's up to each of us to take these little lessons back home and apply them outside of Washington's infamous Beltway.